That musical interlude was by special request, mine, because of the 86 some books that I read during the pandemic. This one, Nomadland, by Jessica Bruder, has been perhaps the most thought-provoking. I read it 3 times and have seen the Academy Award-winning film. And I'm still haunted and inspired by the meticulously researched story of the hardworking, middle-class, older Americans who, particularly in the wake of the recession of 2008, found themselves without jobs, life savings, pensions, and ultimately their homes. They are the houseless, but they are not the homeless living wretchedly in the streets. They are also not the retirees who happily sell large homes, buy a $500,000 condo on wheels, and hit the road for years of carefree adventure. The people of Nomadland have shelter and transportation. It's just that their transportation is now their shelter. Be it an RV, a small travel trailer, a camper, a converted cargo van, a Prius, or a bicycle towing a tent. This book focuses on several van dwellers who have sold most of their belongings, bought which road home they could afford, and have outfitted it as creatively and economically as possible, including the 5-gallon bucket, which is now their toilet. The van dwellers may have prepared by following the advice of the author of How to Live in a Car, Van, or RV. First, live only in your bedroom. Then mark the internal measurements of your future van home with large cardboard boxes. Now move into your cardboard van. For many, once they've hit the road, their sole income is often meager Social Security check. One former advertising art director had gone from spending $100,000 a year to living on $75 a week. So the nomads joined the already huge army of work campers who travel the country working seasonal, temporary jobs, often physically demanding and for bare minimum wage. One of the prime gigs for the nomads is joining Amazon's camper force. Chances are, this Amazon package that you received practically overnight was scanned, shelved, sorted, boxed by a 70-year-old woman with a master's degree who has spent a 12-hour shift walking 15 miles on concrete, lifted up to 50 pounds, squatted hundreds of times, climbed dozens of stairs, and who exists on Tylenol and coffee. Another choice gig is working the cold, wet October sugar beet harvest in Minnesota and North Dakota, where one of the largest producers of manufactured sugar in the world hires hundreds of work campers to help fill 3 dozen massive storage warehouses with 50,000 truckloads of beets a day. Think of that when you put sugar in your coffee. This new labor force is everywhere. They're hosting state and national park campgrounds, manning rides at Dollywood and Adventureland, selling Christmas trees or pumpkins at roadside stands, or seize candy at mall kiosks, usually making between $7 and $8 an hour. They're often too exhausted to socialize much, but there's great camaraderie and a sense of like-minded community when they do gather, whether it's around a pot of chili and a small campfire, or especially at huge annual events like the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous at Quartzsite, a small town in the middle of the Arizona desert where local population of a few thousand swells to 500,000 in January through March, where nomads from all over the country converge to create the world's largest swap meet, an exchange of not only products and garage sale items, they're always getting rid of something, but of services, haircuts, dog grooming, massage, tarot card reading. They exchange advice, how to fix tires, install a solar panel or electric inverter, how to find the safest, friendliest parking places, now that many, many, many communities have criminalized homelessness, like places like Walmart, Cracker Barrel, large truck stops on the freeways, 24-hour gyms. And at the big tent gathering, dozens of work camper employers interview applicants for the upcoming jobs. Competition is fierce for those employers who offer good pay, a place to park, and appreciative, respectful management. Around the campfires, friendships are built and renewed. New tribes are formed. Weary bodies are soothed and tired spirits are lifted. Coffee and meals are shared. And nomad land again becomes a place of freedom, resilience, resourcefulness, well-being, and looking forward to their next adventure. And I am once again left lying on my bed, imagining living with all my belongings in one corner of that bedroom. Try it. Or just read the book and marvel at those who have.
Thank you, Carolyn. I found that very interesting. I think I'm going to go buy the book. And up comes Miss Sherri, and who will share her favorite book with us.
Breath by James Nestor. James Nestor was a scientific journalist who traveled all over the world, interviewing different people. For example, he interviewed Wim Hof, who is called the Iceman. He's from Norway. And this Wim Hof was able to swim the length of half of a football field under ice water, under ice. He could also submerge himself in a tank of ice for an hour. And this was quite a remarkable thing. He's quite famous. He's been on TV, he's been on ABC, whatever. He's been on many things. So James Nestor was very interested in these things. He also interviewed free diving. And one of his favorite subjects was this lady that could free dive down 300 feet without oxygen. Mm-hmm. And that was quite an accomplishment. Something he said, well, I just don't think everybody could do that. And they went, well, yes, you can. You use your breath. Mm-hmm. So I was quite interested. A yoga friend of mine that travels all over the United States texted me and said, this book will change your life. And I went, right. And so I did order the book out of curiosity and read it through. It's written in narrative form, so it's quite easy to read through. And it was so exciting and fun to read. It wasn't technical. It was stories about his different experiences with the breath. I read it, and then I shared it with my yoga group. And everybody there has read it, and we do some of the practices. But it was interesting how we all normally do this. And one of the premises of the book is that we are all nasal breathers. We're all mouth breathers. We need to be breathing, inhaling and exhaling through our nose. And he investigated why there was a reason for it. So let me just read you from the cover, and then I will tell you some little details in here that were interesting to me. There's nothing more essential to our health and well-being than breathing. Take air in, let it out. Repeat 25,000 times a day. Yet, as a species, humans have lost the ability to breathe correctly with grave consequences. Journalist James Nestor travels the world to figure out what went wrong and how to fix it. The answers aren't found in pulmonology labs, as we might expect, but in the muddy digs of ancient burial sites, secret Soviet facilities, New Jersey choir schools, and the smoggy streets of Sao Paulo. Nestor tracks down men and women exploring the hidden science behind ancient breathing practices like pranayama, sudarshan, kriya, and tuma, and teams up with pulmonary tinkerers to scientifically test long-held beliefs about how we breathe. Modern research is showing us that making even slight adjustments to the way we inhale and exhale can jumpstart athletic performance, rejuvenate internal organs, halt snoring, asthma, and autoimmune diseases, and even straighten scoliotic spines. None of this should be possible, but yet it is. Drawing on thousands of years of medical text and recent cutting-edge studies in pulmonology, psychology, biochemistry, and human psychology, breath turns this conventional wisdom of what we thought we knew about our most basic biological function on its head. You will never breathe the same again. That's absolutely true. You do find yourself, especially during exertion, where you're not even getting that whole oxygen into your lungs. It's all surface. So if you notice that athletes, and especially swimmers, never do that, they run with their mouth shut because they can inhale and exhale much better without this. Now, James Nestor did travel all over the world interviewing these people. However, he, during the COVID time, I guess, right before that, he was run down and he was having a lot of allergies. He had had pneumonia 3 times and his body was not good. So he went to his doctor, and he was living in San Francisco at the time. He went to his doctor, and his doctor said, well, you need to go to this class and learn how to breathe. So his eyebrows went up and he went, oh, right. So anyway, he did end up going to this ancient Victorian in Haight-Ashbury, not too far from where he lived. He rode his bicycle there. So he went to this, and he went into this cold room. It was drafty. It was in the fall. It was a little cold, and he kind of sat by a window, so he was chilled, but there were blankets in the room, and he's thinking, well, I'm going to get one because I'm cold. So the person that was conducting the class came in and started a tape, and everybody was supposed to listen to the tape. People had been there before, but he never had, and he's looking around going, golly, what kind of people are these? He felt like that wasn't the space for him. However, he thought because it was free and the lady took her time to come in and conduct the class, he would try to go ahead and finish it out. He would have felt guilty had he left. So he did. They closed their eyes. They listened to the tape. They did the breathing that was required for an hour. And at first he went, I just don't think I can do this. This is very boring. But he did persist. And so he was chilled. And about the last 15 minutes, all of a sudden he started sweating, just sweating. His whole respiratory system, his sympathetic nerves kicked in, and he just started sweating, and he couldn't figure out what happened. So he left that, and he was just amazed by what happened. So he did go back and determined that he was breathing wrong, and that the breathing had given him a lot better feeling. It gave him more energy, and he went, I wonder why. I wonder why this is true. And so this was when he started his own investigation. He must have been pretty well off because he could travel all over the world, and he could pay fantastic sums to get these tests done. And he went to Stanford and got all the tests done for his respiratory, his heart rate, his breathing, his blood pressure. And then he had a friend that he had interviewed in Nova Scotia that was also interested. He was a breathing therapist, and he said, why don't you come here and do this with me? We'll go through this routine that is suggested that we do to increase our breathing. So one of the first things they did, his friend came over and they stayed together, and they They had testing equipment at home also, but the one of the first tests was to completely plug your nostrils, day and night, all the time, completely plugged. So you're forced to breathe out of your mouth. So they did, and they took their all their measurements about 3 times a day, and this went on for 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, they were both about ready to give it up because their blood pressure had heightened, their respiratory system, their resting heart rate was very, very high, and so they went back to Stanford, and that was, the plugs were taken out, and they had like 3 or 4 days, I guess, of just plain, and then they had where you just breathe out of your nose, so you have your mouth closed and you breathe out of your nose, and every measurement they had taken went right back down, and even lower when they started, and they had more energy. They did bicycle trips and around Golden Gate Park, and anyway, he was just fascinated. These different tests lasted quite a while, and then they were both really curious about, well, what caused this? So they found out that this class that he had gone to originally was using yogic breathing. And by yogic breathing, it's taking your inhale and starting at your tummy, pushing it up through your diaphragm, up into your lungs, and that's when you get the final expansion. You can feel your ribs expand. So you do that like 3 or 4 times, and then you do something called a bellows breath. And a bellows breath, if you've ever done yoga around, they call it breath of fire or bellows breath, and it's you try to snuff out a candle with your nose, your mouth is closed, and you're huffing. And your tummy is going in and out and in and out and in and out. And if you ever watch somebody that's like an Indian yogi on TV, their navel, they're thin, very thin anyway, so their navel almost goes and hits their backbone. I mean, they're in that far. So that was interesting. They do that, and then they just do a very calm inhale and exhale. And they found that the perfect time to do this is 5.5 seconds for each inhale, 5.5 seconds for an exhale. So that was all over the world. So anyway, he started doing his research, and he found this information on this guy called George Catlin, who was from back east in the early 1800s, 1830, 1840, who was a photographer and an artist. And he was an adventurer, and he got really tired of just shooting and being in the back east society. So he went to live with North American Indians, different tribes all over the United States, and he did learn the languages, and he noticed that all their teeth were very straight. They'd never been to a dentist. Their teeth were totally straight. And he observed that when a child was born and was through feeding, the mother squeezed the lips together to make them breathe through their nose. And when they were very tiny infants, they also squeezed the lips together to make them breathe through their nose. By breathing through the nose, it actually modified their jaw structure. So then, of course, he started researching that and taping his mouth shut, sleeping at night. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I could go on and on. So anyway, my yoga teacher actually still does this, really, and he tapes his mouth shut at night. And anyway, I was told to wrap it up. I could go on, and sorry, I didn't know what I was talking about. But if you're interested in this, I would suggest you read Breath. I keep wanting to say breathe, but it's Breath. And he has many TED Talks. It's great to see his stuff. It's more convincing, and it'll really incite your curiosity. Thank you. And breathe.
Thank you, Sherri, very much. It sounds like you got a lot out of that book. And now we will have Don come share his favorite book with us.
No, okay. Limited room back here. Well, books are one of my favorite things, actually, and I've learned to appreciate them even more as I've gotten old. I've also learned to drop the ER on that word. Today, I have actually brought about as many books as I can carry. They're pretty heavy, but I'm going to focus on one, which is the science and the near-death experience, how consciousness survives death. Pretty heavy book for a Sunday morning, but that's where we're going. It is written by Chris Carter, who is a researcher and a journalist who had graduate and undergraduate degrees from the University of Oxford in England. It is actually part of a trilogy. And the first book of the trilogy is Science and Psychic Phenomena, The Fall of the House of Skeptics. And the final book is The Science and the Near-Death... Oh, it's the one I just gave you. Never mind. I'm getting confused already. Science and the Afterlife Experience, Evidence for the Immortality of Consciousness. Okay. With that part behind us, so first of all, what is an NDE experience? Though there's much variations, some of the common elements are separation from the body, passage through a tunnel or darkness, encountering some form of a light, feeling of peace and joy, encountering a presence, undergoing a life review, entering another realm, and meeting with deceased relatives. Seeing, knowing, or hearing things the person could not possibly have been exposed to are sometimes present. Most of the individuals that have had an NDE feel it has been the single most significant event of their life. And I can vouch for that because I have a friend that had one many years ago. It seems that reporting and describing NDEs has recently become more acceptable, and several books have been published that describe first-hand accounts of that, and you can certainly get them on Amazon, and I would recommend them if you're interested in that sort of thing. Reports of NDEs have come from people who have survived life-threatening accidents or illnesses, but there are also many reports from individuals who have only perceived that their lives are under threat. There are also many reports from individuals who did not expect to die, either because the accident or illness was sudden and unexpected, or because the NDE occurred during an operation that they fully expected to survive. Researchers have attempted to determine how frequent NDEs occur in the population, but estimates vary quite widely, in fact, ranging from a low of 10% up to as much as 30% of the population. So obviously it's not an insignificant thing. It is definitely happening. So does consciousness depend on the brain? Neuroscientists have tried for decades to locate the sites of memory in the brain, and an enormous number of animals have been expended in the attempt. However, even after removing up to 60% of an animal's brain, the unfortunate animals can often still remember what they were trained to do. Even experiments with invertebrates, such as the octopus, have failed to locate the specific memory locations. Predating all original religion, the belief in an afterlife is fundamental to the human experience and dates clear back even to the Neanderthals. And reports of psychic abilities date back to the beginnings of recorded history in all cultures. Psychic abilities have been demonstrated again and again under the most rigorous controlled experimental conditions. However, by the mid-19th century, spurred on by the progress of science, many people began to question the existence of an afterlife, and the doctrine of materialism, which dictates that consciousness is a creation of the material brain only, began to spread. The mainstream science community and some others have vehemently denied the existence of these phenomena for centuries. The battle over their reality has carried on in scientific academies, courtrooms, scholarly journals, newspapers, radio stations, and has included scandals, wild accusations, ruined reputations, as well as bizarre characters on both sides of the debate. The controversy continues not because these events and abilities cannot be verified, but because their existence challenges deeply held world views, more strongly rooted in religious and philosophical beliefs than in hard science. Carter reveals how the doctrine of materialism, in which nothing matters except matter, has become an infallible article of faith for many. Materialists have gone to extraordinary lengths to try to dismiss, explain away, and even suppress the data. In other fields of inquiry, the collective evidence would have been considered extremely compelling decades ago. However, one by one, Carter examines and ultimately refutes the claims of the skeptics using logic and science. The evidence for continuation of consciousness is vast and varied and comes from a lot of different sources. It comes from NDEs, deathbed visions, children who remember previous lives, apparitions, and communications through mediums. He proposes three categories of convincing evidence. The first one is proof beyond all doubt. The next one is proof beyond all reasonable doubt. And finally, preponderance of the evidence. The first category, proof beyond all doubt, is generally agreed to apply only to the fields of logic and pure mathematics. Beyond that, history has shown us that we can't be infallibly beyond all doubt of much of anything. But the evidence for survival of consciousness is in the second category, proof beyond all reasonable doubt, and certainly way and beyond the best explanation that anybody has come up with. Like many others before him, Carter too has come to the conclusion that an impartial examination of all the evidence without religious or materialistic prejudice fully supports the reality of survival and continuing exercise of the most significant capacities of the human mind, not to be confused with the brain. So in conclusion, if you don't believe in psychic phenomena, you are simply unaware of the evidence, or you choose to disregard it. And excuse me, I'm losing my voice. So in concluding, I would quote one of the reviewers of the book, Larry Dossi, MD, who you probably have heard of. He's written a number of books, Healing Words and The Power of Premonitions. He says that Chris Carter is a one-man wrecking crew for the time-worn, tedious, petulant, and often flimsy complaints of the die-hard skeptics. The science of consciousness is doomed to be incomplete without Carter's keen insights into this account. And all three of the books have extensive notes backing up the statements that he makes, and extensive bibliography if you choose to research the situation further. So that's my contribution today. Thank you for listening.